Hello folks, Steve Maloney here. Today I'm in the High Street on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh as part of my Royal Mile tours. So please come with me. So we start today's tour on West Parliament Square, and in front of us is St Giles Cathedral. There's been a church there since the 1100s, but the church you're looking at today was probably built around about the 1400s and has been refaced in the 1800s. So this building here is the Signet Library and is part of the Courts of Edinburgh. And this building here is the French Consulate, which was built in the early 1900s as the Midlothian County Council buildings. This Signet Library was built in around about 1810, 1815. So we're going to walk through this little alleyway down the side of St Giles Cathedral into Parliament Square. Now, we're starting to see a man on horseback. This is the oldest lead statue in the UK. This is King Charles II, who died in 1685. And that's him on horseback here. And here we have the old Parliament building. Now, Old Parliament Hall is in that little archway there. And that was built in the early 1600s and designed by an architect called Sir James Murray, who was the King's architect. There we go. And that grand looking building straight in front of us, in front of King Charles, is the old Court of the Exchequer. Now I want to show you this little thing here. This is car park space number 23. Now, this area here was originally a graveyard for St Giles, and this is the approximate marking of where John Knox, the reformer, was buried. He died in 1572. So this rather grand looking building in front of us is the head office for the City of Edinburgh Council. This started its life off in the 1750s as the Royal Exchange, which was supposed to be a business centre for the local merchants, but sadly it didn't take off, and they continued to conduct their business just down there where the Mercat Cross was. So in the early 1800s the building was taken over by the council. So in front of us we have the Mercat Cross, used by town criers to make announcements, and as we spin round we come into the forecourt of the city chambers. Now, the horse you can see up there is his name is Bucephalus, and it was Alexander the Great was actually taming the horse by facing it to the sun. Rather striking looking statue. And as we walk over to this corner here, we have a great Polish general called General Stanislaw Maciek. He was a tank commander in World War II. So as we look up towards St Giles Cathedral, we have a statue in front of us of Adam Smith. So Adam Smith was one of the fathers of Scottish Enlightenment, and he was a famous economist who wrote The Wealth of Nations, which was a blueprint for many countries' economies nowadays. And as we start to walk down the Royal Mile, we have all these little closes. So here we have Old Fish Market Close. No prizes for guessing what that was used for. Borthwick's Close. This would have been owned by the Borthwick family, and it would have been a closed end. And then we have Old Assembly Close. And right in front of us we have a 17th century wellhead. These were used to pipe water down the Royal Mile from the reservoir next to the castle. And opposite we have the filling station, which is a retired cinema. Nowadays it's a restaurant. So we have lots of collections of these buildings. Are pretty much Victorian, but if you look down this one here, Burnett's Close, at the top we have, it says Mary's Chapel. So Mary's Chapel used to be a church down that little lane, and attached to that was the lodge number 1, and it was said to be the first ever Masonic lodge of Freemasonry, dating back to 1599. So moving on from that, we have a church in the distance. Here is the Tron church, where people gather at New Year, and this was built in 1637 under the orders of King Charles I. And in 1824 there was a huge fire where all these buildings collapsed in the Great Fire of Edinburgh, and the steeple was burnt to the ground and had to be replaced. So the steeple you're looking at is 1824 or after. So there we go. Now, before we go down to the next section of the Royal Mile, I'm going to take you underneath the Tronkirk. So the Tronkirk was built in 1637 on the foundations of an old street. Now that old street was called Marilyns Wynd, and the foundations of the buildings that were there are still in existence. So I'm going to go up these little steps and I'm going to take you in or underneath the Tron to Marilyns Wynd. So right now I am currently underneath the Tronkirk, and this is well, I'm actually standing. The lights aren't all switched on, but I'm actually standing in an old dwelling, an old house, and so that's the foundations of another place there, and over there. So this was basically built over in 1637 under the orders of King Charles I. The Tronkirk was built on, I don't know if you can see there's like cobblestone road there. The Tronkirk was built on top of this, and they basically just built the church on the foundations of this old street called Marilyns Wynd. Fascinating. So our next section of the High Street starts here, just at the traffic lights on the junction of South Bridge and North Bridge. Now this building we're looking at on the corner here is the old British Linen Bank building, and to the left of that is the Radisson Hotel. Now this building is made to look old, but it was actually built in 1990. So as we come down the Royal Mile on the High Street section, we are faced with lots and lots of really cool pubs. Now this one here has a little story beside it. This is called the Mitre, which seems like a strange name for a pub, but I'm going to tell you why in a second, why it's called the Mitre. Now I don't know if you know that a mitre is actually a bishop's hat, and just down here on the right hand side was the site of here we go, just here. The Bishop of Spottiswoode lived here in 1578. And that was rebuilt in 1874. So as we make our way down the Royal Mile, we come to a little close here called Paisley Close. Now there's a wee story attached to this. And if you notice above the building, it's above the gateway, it says, "Heave away chaps, I'm no dead yet." And that's basically what happened. Was this building above collapsed when a baker was fitting an oven inside, and he took away a supporting wall, and the building collapsed. I think it was in the 1860s, and so 35 people died as a result of this. And this young lad here is called Joseph McIver, and his voice was heard from the rubble, and he was supposedly shouted, "Heave away lads, I'm no deed yet." But this has been sort of translated into more English. So bit of lovely little story attached to that. And as we come down here, on the right hand side you'll see the Museum of Childhood. Lots of really nice cashmere shops, Christmas shop, Enchanted Galaxy, that'll be a Harry Potter thing. And right in front of us we have John Knox's house. Now John Knox allegedly stayed here in the mid 1500s, but the house was actually owned by a goldsmith called John Mossman, and so it's open to debate whether he stayed here or not, but nowadays it's called John Knox's house, and it's absolutely stunning. And you can also see another one of the 1674 wellheads. And we also have a lovely house in the corner here dating to the 1400s called Newbury House. Absolutely gorgeous. Move for all the traffic, what a noise. So as we come down here, this takes us to the end of the high street, and I'm going to take you down a little lane. Now this is called Tweeddale Court, and it's named after the Marquis of Tweeddale, who lived here in the 1600s. But if you're an Outlander fan, you'll probably recognise this. And we have an old section of the King's Wall here, which was built in 1450. That there is the King's Wall. And this little garage-like building dates to the 1700s, and it's actually a sedan garage. Now, a sedan was basically a chair with a cover on it, which you could carry around like a sort of taxi service, but it'd be like two strong guys holding the sedan chair. So this is, it says Oliver and Boyd here, and you can actually see the old crane. Oliver and Boyd was the old printing company, and that's the old crane that used to lift up pallets of paper into it. Isn't that stunning? Also in the early 1800s, around about 1805, 1806, the building behind us was a bank, an office for the British Linen Bank, and they had a messenger called John Begbie, who was found lying in a pool of blood round about here, and he was robbed of £4,000 cash. Now, they never found anybody for his murder, but the money was eventually found several months later, stashed in a wall in the new town. Quite a morbid end to the story, but history's history. Now, at the traffic lights here, there used to be a big gatehouse called the Netherbow Port. Now, if you look up to the side of this building here, it gives you an idea of what the Netherbow Port looked like. So you can imagine that gatehouse transposed to just here to block off the end of the street, and it was demolished in 1764 as it became ruinous. And if you notice, the pub on the right hand side here, it's called the World's End Pub. Now, the reason for this is, to many people, this would have been the World's End, because you had to pay a toll to come in and out of the Netherbow Port, and a lot of people lived in extreme poverty and couldn't afford the whatever it cost to get out of the city and back in again. So at the other side of the traffic lights is the Canongate, which used to be a separate borough, and that was why the Netherbow Port was here. So our next tour is going to focus on the Canongate and the bit at the bottom, which is called Abbey Strand, next to the palace. Okay, thanks for tuning in. So guys, hope you enjoyed my little tour of the high street. Thanks for tuning in. If you like my channel, please subscribe, please like the video. Thanks very much.